everybody, this is Taylor from ATAGO here in Japan. Welcome to our webinar about the CM-800 Alpha today. Sorry we got started a couple minutes late, but we should be good to go from here. So today's webinar is about the CM-800 Alpha. This is part 3 in our 4-part series about our inline refractometers. So some of the information may be a little bit repeating, but I hope to dive in a little bit more into just the CM-800 Alpha today, go into some of the details that you might not have considered before, and then also kind of going over the different questions and information you should be figuring out before getting into the CM-800 Alpha, like things you should know about your sample in regards to the unit and accuracy and how to pick which accessory and data output. So we're going to kind of go a little bit more in detail with all of that. As usual, please put your questions in the chat box so that we can get to those when we have some time. I will go ahead and get started here in just a moment with the presentation. So 1 second here. Okay, so we have ATAGO CM-800 Alpha inline process meter. So this is actually our most popular inline refractometer across the series. I think the reason being that it's still budget friendly but has a higher accuracy. Also has some good specifications too that covers a wide range of applications. Also has some good aspects in terms of design as well, and we'll talk about that in a little bit here. Okay, so this is just a quick overview for the models that are covered under the CM-800 series itself. The model that we'll be focusing on mostly today is the CM-800 Alpha standard model. We do have some other types, CM tank Alpha, which is more to be mounted into the tank, and I'll briefly show how that one's installed. We also have CM in tank, which is more just submerged into the sample itself. And then we have CM-IS Alpha, which is designed more for areas or hazard zones that need something more along explosion-proof guidelines. So if you are interested in these other two ones, we're not going to go over them too much today. So maybe that's something that we can cover in a future webinar. But if you have specific questions regarding those, please email us. So we'll mainly be focusing on CM-800 Alpha today, and then I'll briefly go over CM tank Alpha as well. Okay, so how to tell if the CM-800 Alpha is right for your application. So the first few questions that you should be asking yourself are the easy ones. Talking about asking yourself if your sample concentration range falls within the measurement range of the CM-800 Alpha. So what's nice about CM-800 Alpha is that it has a wide range from 0 up to 80% bricks. So if you happen to have a sample that is above 80% bricks, you'll have to go with a different model. So always just make sure that you know the range of your sample so that it will always be within the measurement range of the unit. If you don't know the bricks of your sample, then that is something that you can contact us. You can do some research online. If you have a handheld refractometer, like a little portable one, or maybe a benchtop one in the lab, you can measure your sample on there to see. So there's various ways that you can find out that information. We're always happy to help with any sample questions regards to the inline refractometer. Also, does your sample tolerance range match with the meter's capability? So if you have a specific sample, like if you have a coolant that you have a tolerance range for that you don't want it to go outside of 0.5% of your target concentration, then something like the CM-800 Alpha with a higher accuracy of 0.1% is going to be completely fine for you. So if you are the type of customer that needs something over 0.1%, like even getting into the range of like 0.05%, then you're going to want to look into our higher end refractometer inline series for the PRM-100 alpha. But usually people are pretty happy with the 0.1% Brix accuracy range. It fits a pretty wide range of sample tolerances for a lot of different company requirements. Next one is going to be just making sure that your sample's temperature also falls within the range of the unit. So I have written here that needs to be within the ATC range. That stands for automatic temperature compensation. So if your sample goes outside of this 5 to 100 degrees C, that's okay. The instrument's not going to instantly blow up or anything like that. You're just going to get some error messages or some inaccurate readings. So just try to make sure that your sample is within the range of the instrument. There is another temperature range of the CM-800 that I will talk about a little bit later when we're talking about things in terms of cleaning. So let's move on here. Okay, next, is your sample compatible with the materials of the meter? So if you're measuring a sample that might be really corrosive or like very acidic, and if it isn't contact with any part of the CM-800 alpha, you might want to check to make sure that your sample is not just going to eat away at the meter. We make it with really high quality materials that are kind of across the board good for manufacturing and are also food safe. But it's always good to double check, especially when you're investing in a higher quality, higher price piece of instrumentation. So let's look here. We've got a little snippet of our instruction manual with our specifications. So you'll see here for materials in contact with the solution or the sample that you're measuring. For the prism, we have artificial sapphire. So it is a really, really high grade type of optical glass. So you're not going to scratch it or damage it easily. But you know, there is always something out there that can damage anything. So just make sure that your sample is compatible with artificial sapphire. And then the prism stage is SUS316L. That's a type of stainless steel. So stainless steel is pretty durable against most materials, but just make sure that you check if you're doing like any type of chemical that might be known for having some reactions with stainless steel. Sometimes certain concentrations of a sample will be more damaging to stainless steel than others. So maybe you have a chemical that is not really compatible with SUS316L, but it's at a very, very low concentration. It might be okay for you, and it might, you know, you're not going to see too much of a difference. Maybe many, many years down the line, you might see some wear and tear. But if you were to measure that sample at a higher concentration, you may see that wear and tear a lot more quickly. So just always make sure that you check your sample with the materials of the meter. Also, you need to think about where you want to have your instrument installed. So just ask yourself, is it going to be installed under the proper conditions? I will be honest with you, not everybody follows the environmental conditions to a T. There's one here that says use the instrument indoors. I've had people actually install them in systems outdoors with a type of covering overhead, and it would be okay. Or maybe they put them in a different type of enclosure outside, like a protective casing around it. So these are definitely our main recommendation, and then you should try to follow them as much as you can. So also just want to make sure that you're following these guidelines pretty closely. Okay. So we have checked our sample, we've checked the accuracy, the temperature, making sure that everything is okay with that, it's going to be installed in the right area. So next we need to kind of think about, we're getting continuous measurements off of this inline refractometer. What do we want to do with the measurements? Are we going to just have the concentration percent on the display only? Or are we going to do a combo of the display reading plus data output? So we have a couple different data output options that you can choose to. CM-800 alpha is really nice because you can switch back and forth depending on which cable you use. So if you are the type of user that needs RS-232C to that type of computer system, that's totally fine. We also have 4 to 20 milliamp. Another word for that is recorder output. I would say 4 to 20 milliamp is probably the most popular across customers. They program that to a program logic controller, otherwise known as PLC, so that they can have it displayed throughout their factory, maybe have an alarm system set up, that type of thing. We also have another option where you can use it with Ethernet, but it will need some type of special adapter. So if you are a person that wants to hook it up to Ethernet, please contact us and then we can give some more information about how you can do that. In terms of the actual cable itself, so I'll show you kind of where that's located on the CM-800 alpha in a little bit. But the cable itself, you plug it into the unit on this side. The wires for wiring it into your system will be on the other side. There's different lengths that you can get to. So if you have your PLC system located a certain distance away from where you actually want the unit installed, you can get different lengths. So they start at 5, 10, 15, and 20 meters. Anything over 20 meters, you're going to have issues with the data being outputted properly, just because like 20 meters is quite a far distance, especially for transmitting data through a cable. So you do have some options there though for where you're putting the instrument and then where you're having your PLC system so that you can get them connected together. Okay, next you need to ask yourself, how are you going to power this instrument? So it kind of just depends on your situation. I would say that it can be pretty 50-50 either way for the power choices. So one of them is DC 24V. That just means that you're wiring it directly into the power. Similar to the data output cable, you can get different lengths. So a 1 meter cable will automatically come with the CM-800 alpha, but you can extend it up to 5 meters. So 1, 2, 3, or 4 or 5 meter cable is available. Also, we have AC adapters. So these are just ones where you'll have the main unit and then you're going to hook it up to the AC adapter, and then you're going to plug it into the power supply. So usually that's just the regular outlet that's in the wall at your factory. So there's just some people that prefer to have it that way. Another thing you can get if you're using the CM-800 alpha with one of our standalone fittings is a stand that's going to hold the unit with the fitting and then the AC adapter right there. So just wanted to make that aware to you that you can have kind of this little setup going for you too, especially if you're not really sure where to put everything. Okay. So we've figured out our sample, making sure all of that is compatible with the CM-800 alpha. We've talked about power and data output. So now we need to think about how we're actually going to install the CM-800 alpha into the system. So generally there's 3 different ways. I've seen people engineer their own really creative ways of putting the CM-800 alpha into their system. But most people go with these 3 different ways. One is directly in the tank, and I'll show you how that is done. Next is going to be a pipeline fitting, so they put it directly into the pipe that's flowing their sample by. And then next is hose connector or compression fitting, making a bypass with hoses. So first off, we have installing directly into a tank. So CM tank alpha is the one that you're going to want to get if you literally want to clamp the unit into the tank and have it measuring what is directly there in your vessel. So in order to do that though, your vessel, so this is kind of our tank side here, has to have an outlet right here for the CM-800 alpha to be inserted into. So this type of outlet is going to be some, it's kind of like a standard FER of 2 or 3 inches. And then the instrument's just going to be plugged into that inlet and then clamped shut. So it's pretty standard as long as you're getting your outlet on your tank is this FER part. So I've had customers that when they're first building their system from scratch, they're already thinking that they want to put an inline refractometer in. So it's pretty easy for them to engineer this type of spout onto their tank because they're building a whole new system. But if you maybe currently have a tank that doesn't have this type of spout, you may want to consider putting it in a pipeline or using the hose connector bypass instead. Okay, so then next is pipeline fitting. So here's just kind of the 3 most popular fitting union types. So what I'm showing here are straight type fittings. We do have some other shapes like an L shape or a pie shape. Those are not really as popular. I think people like to keep it simple, especially for cleaning and whatnot, and maybe space for keeping the straight type style here. So we have different union types. Most popular is the tri-clamp ferrule, where literally it's just clamped into the pipe. Then we have a screw type and flange. In the last webinar we did about CM base alpha, I actually held the real fittings during the webinar and kind of talked about them. And so if you kind of want to see the fittings a little bit more up close, I recommend that you take a look at that webinar because I get pretty into it, like showing on the camera. So you can kind of get an idea of the size compared to the unit and whatnot. So a little bit more about installing the fittings. So here's just a really quick picture. Very standard installation for CM-800 alpha. So here we have our pipeline, and we have our sample flowing through this pipe, and then here's the fitting, and then we just install the unit directly into the fitting. And then it looks like they're also doing data output, and then they have the power here. And unit is either measuring water, yeah, it must be measuring water at 0.00. One thing when you're installing the fitting into your system is you have to be kind of aware of the sample flow. So fluid flow, if you have a horizontal pipeline fitting, needs to be flowing. I mean, it doesn't have to be left to right, it could be the other way, but we just want to make sure that it is filling up the fitting entirely, that there's not too less of sample, that maybe it's not always across the sensor or things like that. So just making sure that the flow is correct. Another thing, if you're like this customer and you want to put it in a vertical pipeline, always make sure that your fluid is flowing from the bottom upwards. Reason is if it's coming from the top and going down, there could be some dead space or air bubbles in the sample when it's flowing downwards, and that might cause some fluctuating measurements. So when the sample is flowing in an upwards motion, it fills all of the dead space, just like if you were to pour milk into a cup, it fills up the cup. Same with the fluid, it's going to fill up all of the space in the fitting and always be against the sensor. So just be aware of that when you are installing a straight type fitting. So I have a lot of information here today. I think I'm going to go over my 30 minutes. So if you guys want to watch this again later, that's fine. Or please feel free to stay to the end. That's totally okay as well. Do we have any questions so far?
Yes, we have one.
Okay.
Does it come with all the flanges and fittings?
Oh, good question. So our fittings, if you get CM Tank Alpha, you don't have to worry about anything. But if you need to install it in using the fitting for pipeline or hose connector, those are separate from the unit. So you do have to buy those additionally. So that will be an additional cost. You said just one question? Okay, perfect. We can move on then. Okay. So next style is hose connector compression fitting type of situation. So here we have the two. One is hose connector and one is a double bite joint, or otherwise known as compression fitting. Basically the difference is just how you connect the hoses to the instrument. So I actually have a real hose connector with me right now that I will show you how that kind of goes on to the unit. So bear with me here for a quick second. Okay. No? Okay, hold on here. Okay. Perfect. Okay, so we have our CM-800 Alpha here with us today. Just a quick note, I have it hooked up to the AC adapter because I'm plugging it directly into the wall. And then here is our hose connector. So hose connector is very, very small. It's probably smaller than you would think, but it is the perfect size to be installed directly onto the CM-800 Alpha, and then you just clamp together. So when you get the hose connector, it will come with a clamp and whatnot, so don't fret too much about the small accessories. Those will all be supplied with the instrument, but just make sure that you have the instrument itself, your type of power, and your type of fitting when you're ordering, but we'll make sure that you have everything you need, so don't worry too much. But yeah, this is pretty much the hose connector. Once it's clamped on, you just make sure that you have your hoses attached properly. Your sample will come in, fill up the inside, and then flow out. Okay. Okay, so back to our little presentation here. Okay, so if you have already figured out how you're going to install the instrument, you're probably wondering, what do I do afterwards? After everything's installed and running and great, what do I do afterwards? So one thing for aftercare for the instrument is how you're going to clean it. The beauty of an inline refractometer is that it's kind of plug and play. So once you have the instrument installed, you can kind of just let it be, and there's not really too much cleaning or maintenance required. Now, if you do have a pretty tricky sample, like if you're doing something that tends to build up on the prism or is more highly viscous, might leave a film if it's kind of oily, then you may want to think about some other type of cleaning options. Also, if you're in the food industry, you are required to clean your entire system or any type of instrumentation installed into the system as well. So you might have a system in place to do that as well. So when it comes to the CM-800 Alpha itself, there's a couple different ways that you can clean it. You can actually remove it entirely from the system, of course, after all the liquid has been drained out and the system is turned off. You can remove it from the system and just clean it with some water, maybe some soap. You can use alcohol if you want. Just make sure that if you're using soap or alcohol that you rinse it off afterwards, and then just wipe it dry with a soft tissue or cloth. So these are really, really highly durable instruments when they're measuring liquids. But if you're using any type of abrasive, like paper towel or any other type of wiping method, then it's not going to be good for the instrument because it is optical. So any type of like scratch or other type of rough damage is not going to be good. So just be a little bit careful in that regards when you're cleaning it. Don't do anything too rough. When it's measuring the sample, it should be totally fine, no scratches or anything. Just make sure that you're not just doing anything strange when you clean. So if you work in the food industry, you're probably familiar with CIP, that's clean in place. It's another type of cleaning method where everything is kept how it is, and either like really hot water or a type of cleaning solution, maybe hydrogen peroxide or peracetic acid or something like that, is also rushed through the system. So you can leave the CM-800 alpha just installed there as is during your CIP process. So that's really nice so that you don't have to worry about removing it. When people do CIP, usually it's at pretty high temperatures. So the instrument can withstand up to 160 degrees C for an extended period of time. So don't worry at all about CIP as long as you're not going past 160 degrees C. It's pretty high, so you should be good. If these two options are not attractive or not available for you, we do have two other cleaning methods. So one is a prism wiper. This is something that you will actually install directly into the fitting on the other side of the CM-800 alpha, that you will actually just press the wiper in and turn it, and it's going to kind of wipe the prism. I do have a video that kind of goes over how to install it directly into the fitting, so feel free to watch that as I talk. So good things about the prism wiper is that it's just another thing you can get as an accessory to install in so that you don't have to remove the instrument to do any type of cleaning. So all you have to remember to do is have somebody go over in there, push it in, turn it, and then pull it back out. So it's very, very easy type of way for cleaning. So when installing it, you do have to take off this back part here. That's called the blanking plate. So you'll stick the prism wiper in, and then CM-800 alpha will be in on the other side there. We should be getting to the part where we take off the cap here. Yep, perfect. So when you are considering accessories for the CM-800 alpha and you're using our fitting, I recommend that you get these accessories directly from us. The reason is these fittings are very highly customized, and the accessories as well, to the actual CM-800 alpha in terms of size and design. So just kind of be careful that you're not buying any weird third-party thing. It's probably better to get the accessory directly from us. Okay, let's see if we can kind of skip a little bit forward here. Let's see, putting it back on, almost there. Okay, so we should be putting in one of our CM-800 alpha units there into the actual fitting. So that's an O-ring actually. That's good to put on for sealing before you put it into the fitting itself. So pretty easily just plugs right in there. And then we clamp it on so it stays together. And then once it's all together, we have our unit. And then you can see the prism wiper on the inside in there, and then you just pull it out, turn it, and whatnot. So yeah, pretty easy, pretty simple. I think once you see it, it's pretty easy to kind of get an idea of how it works. Okay. Do we have questions so far?
Yes, so do we need to clean it every day?
So that is going to really depend on your sample and your application and what you're doing. Like I said before, the beauty of an inline refractometer is it's kind of you install it and you let it be and it does its own thing. There's not too much maintenance. If you have CIP, you can just wait to clean it, whenever you have to do CIP for your process. But I would say just keep an eye on the measurements. If you start seeing any fluctuation, then you might want to clean it at that point, because that might mean that there could be buildup on the prism. The CM-800 alpha is great because buildup doesn't occur too often. I'll show you in a little bit why and the design about the CM-800 alpha that helps avoid that. Is there another question? Okay, perfect. So last accessory that I will talk about today is going to be US Alpha Ultrasonic Cleaner. So this one is really nice just because it is actually, let's see here, sorry, 1 second. Yeah, here we go, here's our US Alpha. This one is nice because it is installed on the other side from the inline refractometer, but it's even less work than the prism wiper. So this one is completely automatic. It's going to use ultrasonic pulses to kind of send pulses across the prism to help prevent any sample buildup. So CM-800 alpha is more about prevention of sample buildup instead of cleaning the buildup that's already occurred. So when we're using US alpha, you can kind of see here where it's going to be installed in the fitting here. It'll be clamped on, and then this is the rod that's going to be inside the fitting and then sending out our pulses. So with US alpha, it's not a like super high power type of pulse. It's not like this type of strength of gushing water or whatnot. So it will kind of depend on your sample how effective it is or not. So if you have a certain sample in mind or you're curious about how well it will work for your application, please contact us so that we can kind of advise on that way. Some popular applications for US alpha are different types of chemicals, cleaning solutions, quenchants, things like that. So if you have anything kind of outside of that realm that you would like to consider, then please let us know. Okay, so additional features that make the CM-800 alpha special. So CM-800 alpha has a measurement interval type of feature. So I will show you a little bit here, but the CM-800 alpha, its measurement interval is basically a second. So it's just like continuously shining the light from the prism to take the measurements. Sometimes this continuous measurement will actually be a little too sensitive for your sample. So if your sample is not completely homogeneous and is prone to kind of having different bricks at different points, then you may see kind of an unstable measurement if you're continuously measuring like this. So some people like to slow down the measurement interval a little bit, so maybe it's like pulse, pulse. So that type of thing, and it will make sure that the measurement isn't too fluctuating. So that just kind of helps the display stay the same a little bit longer. So we have people in the tomato industry that really like that feature. Just the nature of like tomato paste, it's causes some fluctuation, like due to like different solids in the sample and other things going on. So having it not be as sensitive or as continuous of a measurement helps them get more stable readings. So that's one nice feature of the CM-800 alpha. There's another type of feature called mode S. That's a stability type of mode. It's different from the measurement interval. For mode S, it's more about measuring more oily samples or inhomogeneous samples, maybe more opaque. So that feature is good for kind of those tricky samples as well. So if you have CM-800 alpha, I recommend to try that out. So this is kind of a feature, kind of not a feature, but it zero sets with water. So it does a quick calibration with water, but it doesn't need to be calibrated often. We don't really have a recommended interval for how often you have to do zero setting, just because it really doesn't have to be done very often. It's different from our handheld refractometers, like a PAL1, where you might be used to calibrating with water every single time you use it. It's a different story. CM-800 alpha will hold calibration longer, so I would recommend to zero set maybe every time you do a checkup for your instrument, or if you see some fluctuating measurements, then you may want to do a quick zero set at that time. But other than that, you don't have to worry about it too much. That being said, what should I do if there's an issue with the CM-800 alpha? So if you have bought it and you have troubles and questions, please contact us. We are here to help you. Okay, so I'm going to switch over to another camera here really quick to talk a little bit about the design and get a little up and personal with the instrument. So just give me one moment here. Okay, so do we have any questions? I guess I should ask. No? Okay, perfect. So give me just a moment here. Okay. So CM-800 alpha, as I said before, here's our AC adapter. This cable is going to be going directly into the wall, and then we have it plugged in from the AC adapter directly into the unit here. So if I turn it this way, hopefully you should see. Oh, hold on, this is probably better. Okay, you should probably be able to see. So this is the outlet for, or the input for the recorder output cable data, and then RS-232C data. And then here is our power. One thing I really want to note is that some people do by accident, if they're using the AC adapter, is make sure that you plug the cable in here first, and then you plug this other cable that goes into the wall in second. If you go the other way, like plugging this cable in first and then plugging this one in second, you may short circuit or have a power issue and then damage the internal components of the CM-800 alpha. So just be careful in terms of that you're plugging it correctly. This cable goes in first and then you plug into the wall. Okay, so here's a quick look at the display of the CM-800 alpha when it's on. Right now it has an error message for LLL. That's just saying that there is nothing on the prism being measured at this time. It has a pretty simple, easy to read display. So if you don't have a PLC system or any type of system to output data to, you can easily access the measurements by just looking at the display. And then if you do get to the point in the future where you want data output, it's easy to just buy the cable that you need later. So if you don't have any means for data output, don't let that hold you back from purchasing the CM-800 alpha. So one good thing about the CM-800 alpha is it's kind of just one unit here. the display and the detection section. Some people like that because it takes up less space, and sometimes when you have a system, you don't really have a lot of space, right? We do have another model called the PRM. That webinar is happening next week, but that is actually two separate types of pieces to it. So the display is separate from the detection area. And there's benefits to that as well that will be covered in that webinar. In terms of the actual sample stage that's going to be coming in contact with the sample, you see right here. So this is like a 3-inch diameter here. It's very, very smooth, very, very flat. And the reason we did that is to reduce the amount of sample buildup so that things will just glide nicely past the prism and not build up. That works very, very well if you have it installed into a pipeline fitting or straight type fitting. Because the sample is always moving, it doesn't really have time to build up on the prism itself. Now, if you get the CM tank alpha that I introduced earlier, and you directly install it into your tank, you want to make sure that the sample in that tank is being continuously stirred so that the sample isn't always stagnant across the prism here. Otherwise, you're just going to have maybe an increased chance of sample buildup, and then you're also just going to be measuring only that little bit of sample that's in contact with the prism. It's not going to be representative of the whole sample in the tank. So that's just one thing that I recommend. I'm going to try to show, I hope you can see the prism and the flashing orange light. So CM-800 alpha uses the 589 nanometer D sodium lamp, which is orange light. So you should be able to see kind of some flashing or some type of orange going on the prism there. So it really just continuously goes. As long as you have power on the instrument, then it's just going to continuously measure that way. So there we have it. That was our CM-800 alpha webinar. I hope that I provided some new details, new information to all of you that were able to join today. Before we leave, just want to see, do we have any questions? No questions. Okay, perfect. Sorry, this went a lot longer than I thought, but like I said, I hope that you learned something new today. Helps you kind of decide if the CM-800 alpha is good for you or not. We're always here to answer questions, so please feel free to contact us. We have another webinar for the PRM-100 alpha series happening next week. So if you haven't signed up for it yet, please do so. All right, well, thank you so much and see you next time.